The courtroom fell silent as Marcus Webb stood before the bench, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he clutched a worn folder containing everything he owned that mattered. His clothes were clean but faded, the kind that had seen too many wash cycles and not enough hope. Judge Richardson leaned back in her leather chair, barely concealing a smirk as she glanced at the case file before her. A custodial hearing. A single father, unemployed, living in a one-bedroom apartment in the poorest part of town. She had seen 1,000 cases like this, or so she thought. When Marcus quietly mentioned that he spoke 11 languages, the judge's lips curled into something between amusement and disbelief. Her court reporter stifled a laugh. Even the social worker assigned to the case raised an eyebrow with undisguised skepticism. "You're lying," the judge said flatly, her words cutting through the air like a blade. The assumption hung heavy in that moment that this man, this struggling father in his threadbare jacket, was just another desperate parent willing to say anything to keep his daughter. If you believe in the power of perseverance, in second chances, and in never judging someone by their appearance, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything, and this story will show you exactly why we should never underestimate the human spirit. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did not raise his voice. He had learned long ago that anger solved nothing, that dignity was sometimes the only possession poverty could not steal. His mind flashed to 7-year-old Sophia, his daughter, waiting in the hallway outside with a social worker, her small fingers probably twisted together the way they always were when she was nervous. Sophia, who had already lost her mother to cancer 3 years ago. Sophia, who was the reason Marcus woke up every morning at 4:30 to study, to apply for jobs, to keep fighting even when the world seemed determined to break him. The judge's doubt was not new to Marcus. He had faced it at every job interview, every parent-teacher conference, every interaction where people looked at his circumstances and made their judgments before he could even speak. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. The proceedings that led Marcus to this moment had begun 6 weeks earlier when a concerned teacher reported that Sophia had come to school in the same clothes 3 days in a row. It was a misunderstanding, an innocent one born from the fact that Marcus's washing machine had broken and he was hand-washing their clothes in the bathtub, air drying them overnight. But the report triggered an investigation, and suddenly Marcus found himself fighting to prove he was a fit parent. The social worker's reports painted a picture of struggle, but not neglect. The apartment was small but spotlessly clean. Sophia was thin but healthy, shy but well-adjusted considering her circumstances. Yet the system had its protocols, its checkboxes and requirements, and Marcus found himself drowning in a sea of bureaucracy that seemed designed for people who had resources he simply did not possess. Standing in that courtroom, Marcus made a decision. He opened his worn folder and pulled out a stack of certificates, diplomas, and letters, each one representing years of sacrifice that no one had bothered to ask about. He began to speak not in English, but in Mandarin, his words flowing with a precision that made the court interpreter sit up straight in surprise. He recited a traditional Chinese poem about perseverance, his pronunciation flawless. Then, without pausing, he switched to Spanish, then French, then Arabic, then Russian. He moved through Portuguese, German, Japanese, Korean, and Italian like a maestro conducting a symphony, each language a thread in the tapestry of his extraordinary life. The smirk vanished from Judge Richardson's face, replaced by something approaching shock. The courtroom, which moments before had been filled with barely concealed mockery, was now completely silent, except for the sound of Marcus's voice. When he finally stopped, returning to English, Marcus's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his voice remained steady. He explained that he had not always been the struggling man standing before her. 15 years ago, he had been a promising doctoral student in linguistics at Columbia University, fluent in 9 languages, and working on his dissertation about language preservation in indigenous communities. His path had been clear, his future bright. Then he met Elena, a nurse from Ecuador whose laugh could light up a room. They married quickly, madly in love. And when Sophia was born, Marcus thought his life was complete. But Elena was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. When Sophia was only 3 years old, the illness consumed their savings, their future, their plans. Marcus dropped out of his doctoral program to care for Elena and Sophia, working 3 jobs to pay for treatments that ultimately could not save her. When Elena died, she left behind a mountain of medical debt and a daughter who needed her father more than ever. Marcus explained how he had spent the last 3 years rebuilding their lives from nothing, how he worked overnight shifts as a warehouse loader and spent his days applying for positions that his incomplete doctorate made him overqualified for, but his lack of a finished degree simultaneously disqualified him from, how he taught himself 2 more languages, Korean and Italian, during Sophia's sleeping hours, because learning was the one thing that poverty could not take from him, the one way he could still feel like the man he used to be. How every rejection letter, every setback, every moment of despair was countered by Sophia's smile, by her progress in school, by the life they were building together despite everything. He spoke about teaching Sophia Spanish lullabies that her mother used to sing, about reading her bedtime stories in different languages, about showing her that knowledge and love were riches that no circumstance could diminish. Judge Richardson sat forward in her chair, her entire demeanor transformed. She asked Marcus why he had not mentioned his educational background in any of the previous paperwork. His answer was simple and devastating. He said he had learned that people did not want to hear about who you used to be when they were judging who you are now, that mentioning his incomplete doctorate only seemed to make people more suspicious, as if his fall from grace was evidence of character failure rather than the sacrifice of a loving husband and father. That he had been told again and again that his past did not matter, only his present circumstances, and his present circumstances were those of an unemployed single father barely keeping his head above water. The judge asked for a 15-minute recess. When court reconvened, her voice was gentler, her questions more thoughtful. She had made phone calls. She had verified his credentials. She had spoken with Sophia's teacher, who confirmed that while Sophia's clothes had been repeated, the child was bright, kind, well-behaved, and clearly adored her father. The social worker, who had been skeptical before, now spoke with visible emotion about the love evident in Marcus's small apartment, about the books in 11 languages stacked carefully on makeshift shelves, about the chart on the wall where Marcus tracked Sophia's achievements in school alongside his own job applications. Judge Richardson made her ruling. Not only would Sophia remain with her father, but the judge was personally connecting Marcus with a university program that helped doctoral candidates in hardship complete their degrees. She was also recommending him for a position as a translator with the court system, a job that would use his extraordinary skills and provide the stability he desperately needed. As she spoke, tears finally spilled down Marcus's cheeks. Years of struggle and fear and determination pouring out in that single moment of validation. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that everyone has a story worth hearing, that appearances can deceive and that perseverance can move mountains, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and leave a comment below. The ending came not in the courtroom, but 3 months later when Marcus, now working as a court translator and enrolled in a completion program for his doctorate, stood outside Sophia's school, waiting for dismissal. His daughter ran to him the way she always did, her backpack bouncing, her face radiant. She was wearing a new dress, one he had been able to afford with his first real paycheck in years. As they walked home hand in hand, Sophia asked him something in Mandarin, then giggled when he responded in Japanese. She had started learning languages with him, turning his greatest passion into their shared joy. Marcus realized in that moment that the judge had not just changed his circumstances that day in court. She had restored his dignity, validated his worth, and reminded him that one person's belief could alter the trajectory of a life. Please comment, never give up below if this story inspired you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. That evening, as Marcus tucked Sophia into bed and read her a story in French, her favorite language because it sounded like music, he thought about the moment Judge Richardson had laughed at him, how close he had come to losing everything, how easy it would have been for the system to see only his poverty and not his potential, only his struggles and not his strength. And he made a promise to himself and to Sophia that he would finish his doctorate, not just for the career it would bring, but to honor Elena's memory and to show his daughter that the obstacles we face do not define us, that sometimes the richest person in the room is the one with nothing but love, knowledge, and an unbreakable will to protect what matters most. The single father who spoke 11 languages had finally been heard, and in being heard, had found his way why.